with our theme today. Today, we will discuss open data. Cities and municipalities increasingly focus on making data more accessible to enhance transparency, accountability, and citizen engagement. These initiatives may vary in scope and implementation, but they all aim to make government information accessible and usable for residents, businesses, researchers, and civil society organizations. There are many innovative and creative ways to encourage meaningful engagement, and the citizens use open data that demonstrate the value of open data in addressing local problems. Taking an open government approach to publishing and managing this data means producing high quality, timely, and reliable data, including citizen-led and locally generated data. In addition, meaningful open data initiatives should be embedded in a larger strategic and policy vision that makes publishing data feasible, sustainable, and usable. In this session, speakers will discuss strategies, innovations, and findings of how open data can provide solutions to local governments. But before we dive a little bit deeper, we'd like to have a quick survey for you. We'll encourage you to take a moment and share your experience and involvement in open data efforts. So let me just pop out the quiz. And here you have it. There's 4 questions for you. So how expert do you feel you are on the subject of open data? And here you have some of skills. So a master Jedi, maybe, not sure. Not a master, but confident. Maybe that's a good way to start. Also, have heard, but you want to know more. That's also a way to go. And I do not have a clue. Maybe that's how you feel, but I'm certain that almost all of you have already heard about open data initiatives. The second one is, how involved are you in advancing open data of your government in your day-to-day work? Very much involved is the first one, and the scale of 5 is not involved at all. So how do you feel about you furthering open data initiatives? Also, on the scale 1 to 5, 5 being the highest score, how much open data is being published and shared in your jurisdiction? Help us understand a little bit better on this. And also, what would you like to know more about when it comes to opening data in your jurisdiction? That's an open answer. You can also share with us what's on your mind and what do you want to know more about open data initiatives. Questions in the survey are in English, Spanish, and French, and please take a moment to answer. While you're completing the poll, let me briefly outline today's session, right? So let me just move forward to this. We'll begin with a keynote from Natalia Carfi from Open Data Charter, who will set the stage by discussing how to enable local governments to achieve better informed policies. After this, we'll move into our panel discussion with leaders in using data to achieve sustainable development goals, open data and gender, and how cities can apply an open data strategy. We'll wrap up with some key information on how to join the Open Gov Challenge, which allows us to think about practical steps forward. We have an outstanding line of experts today. Natalia Carfi from ODC, as I already said, Jenna Slotin from the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, Ana Gabriel from Latin American Open Initiative, and Ben Snaith from Open Data Initiative. We want to thank them all for sharing their knowledge and expertise with all of us. But before we hand it over to Nati, let's take a moment to revisit the poll and review the results. So no one here believes, or at least no one believes it's a master Jedi. Not even Nati Carfi. I don't know why, but not a master, but confident is the.
I know I didn't answer. I thought it was for the participants.
No, you're also a participant. You're also here to share your knowledge. So okay, 60% are not a master but confident. That's great to hear. have heard but want to know more, that's also great to hear, which is a 40%. So we still have a lot to learn in this area. Also, how involved are you in advancing open data of government in your day-to-day work? So I think that 40% feels like they're not even close to really moving forward in this subject, but there is still a lot of opportunities. So I hope this deep dive inspires you and gives you better examples on how to implement initiatives. On scale of 1 to 5, being the highest score, 5, how much open data is being published and shared in your jurisdiction. So yet again, 36% is in scale number 4. So we still have a lot of opportunity there. So please, speakers, let's inspire all these attendees today. And lastly, I think I have to see exactly the details of this answer, but then I'll share with you which ones are the things that people will love to know more about data, and I will share that specifically with all the speakers so they can also share maybe later some of their thoughts in this. So now we are going to move forward. To dive deep in this topic, I think that it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Natalia Carfi. She is the Executive Director of Open Data Charter and has been working on open data and open government for over 10 years. She's also part of an OGP steering committee. And today she will talk about the importance of using open data to have better informed policies at the local level. So Nati, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Clora, and thanks everybody for being here. Thanks for putting up this session. I'm glad to be here to speak a little bit about open data, what it looks like, and a couple of ideas that can help with OGP commitments and with public policies based on data and evidence. Let me go through the process of moving along. Okay, so I'm going to talk about open data and the Open Data Charter's principles. And let me first introduce a little bit the Open Data Charter and the work that we do. From the questions that we just got, there's still a lot of necessary work to be done, spreading the word about what open data is, what it looks like, and how a public policy around open data can be shaped. So let me deep dive a little bit on that. Open data, as you can all read here, is digital data that is made available with the technical and legal characteristics necessary for it to be freely used, reused, redistributed by anyone, anytime, anywhere. And when we're talking about governmental data, governmental open data, we're also talking about proactive transparency in a way to help enhance the right to access information. So governmental open data helps out also with the citizens' right to access any type of data that the government creates and manages, except for, of course, private data, security, national security issues. But the core idea is that the data that governments create and manage belongs to the citizens. So it's not the propriety of the governmental officials that are creating that data. So data, open data, comes to that is fundamental right of the citizens as you would say the owners of the data that is being created. This is for those that are already from the open data community. This is something that you might have seen a zillion times. But for those that are rather new to the open data concept and open data policies, let me introduce the 5 stars of open data. This has been around for a long time now. It wasn't my creation. It's Tim Berners-Lee that created kind of this idea of the 5 stars of open data. And just to give and kind of an overall perspective of what open data is and what open data isn't, we're gonna walk together through at least the first 3 steps. So as you see here, we have 5 steps of kind of open data and stars of open data. The least amount of stars is the least open, and the more amount of stars that you have, it's more open data. So let's get going with the first step. As you see, there's only one star, and we have a PDF document there. And I think everybody here can relate to the situation where you have a PDF document, and you try to copy and paste whatever is in the PDF into a Word document. And then you're stuck for like an hour to try to kind of reorganize whatever you copy and paste it. I know everybody has been through that process here, and if not, just try and you'll see how complicated it is. That is a very easy way of explaining how the PDF doesn't allow reuse of the data contained in that format. So when we're talking about open data, as I said, it's like freely reusable, as easy as possible. PDF, not a good standard for opening up data. Why is it still in the discussion of the 5 stars of open data? Because from a transparency perspective, it's better to have a PDF than to have nothing published. So from the citizens' perspective, as far as data from the government, it's better that the government actually publishes the PDF than just not to have anything. But it's not a reusable document, it's not a reusable format. And as I said, you're probably stuck a couple of minutes or even an hour trying to figure out how to restructure the data once you try to reuse it. Let's move to the second step together. You can see there's an Excel sheet. We do have two stars there, so it's better. We're a step ahead and 2 stars. The thing here is, of course, we've all seen Excel sheets, and you can actually extract the data, create visualizations out of the data, extract just a little bit of the data that is there, paste it in another Excel sheet, reuse it. Of course, it allows you to do that. But why do we have only 2 stars here? And why is it so low in the steps? Because you actually need to have money to be able to pay for the licenses of Microsoft Office to be able to open a document in Excel. And if you're kind of pirating that, just don't tell me. But the legal and formal way is to actually have money to pay for those licenses to be able to open up a document in Excel. And the idea of open data, once again, going back to the first slide, is free of use. And if you need money to use it, we're not going into the free. So once again, it is there because it allows, of course, the reuse. It is there because it's something that most public offices use, and having the data out there in an Excel sheet is better than not having the data, and it's even better than having it in a PDF. But let's move through to the third step. Sorry, my cat decided to join the call. There we are. Third step, we have a CSV. Most of our of your computers, if you have Excel, will probably open the document in Excel, but you can actually access the document through OpenOffice. So you don't need money to have the program that would allow you to use to open up, a CSV. And so the free aspect of it is there. Through a CSV document, of course, you can, once again, extract the data, use the data, visualize the data, share it and paste it in another document. So the reuse bit is there. And the format actually allows you to access it without having to have money. So that, for example, goes through to the free aspect of open data. All of this to say, and I'm going to stop here for the sake of time, there's, of course, more complex ways of opening up data and more stars, which means it's a better format and a better way of opening up data. All of this needs to be accompanied with an open license that allows the data to be reused. And most governments usually use CC licenses, Creative Commons licenses, that actually allow citizens and inform citizens of the potential ways that the data can be used. So that's there. There's a couple of governments that have created their own versions of open licenses, which is very important. And we can share a lot of information around that. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of work already been done, a lot of do's and a lot of don'ts on open data policies that we can definitely share. But the idea is that you get a concept of what openness means and what an open format is and what an open format isn't. Let me move forward. So let me introduce the organization that I lead. As Clara said, I'm the ED of the Open Data Charter. We are a collaboration between over 200 governments and experts working on open data. We were created 9 years ago in the outskirts of Unga Week, so we just turned 9. And we have kind of a twofold way of existing, if you will. There's an actual charter with 6 principles that was created through a consultative process, a participatory process that took almost 2 years, trying to create principles that any government at any level should implement while creating their open data policies. And then when the document was finalized, there was the decision made to create an organization that could help promote those principles and implement those principles. I lead the organization that helps promote those principles, but let's see what the Open Data Charter looks like. As I said, there's governments that adopt the charter, and you can see there, those in orange are federal governments or national governments, and those dots in blues are subnational governments. So governments can adopt the charter, and then we can work together with the organization. These are the 6 principles of the Open Data Charter. These have been revised again through a participatory process, and our community and network decided that the principles were still sound. They're pretty upfront. Our most contested principle, if you will, is the first one, open by default. We say that governmental data should be open by default. And once again, this is a principle. So the idea is that whenever you're going through the process of kind of modernizing your digital systems, your digital infrastructure, you should think about the moment when the data that legally you can open should be open, because the legacy technology that we've seen governments have was not thought of when the open data was not there as part of the conversation when those systems were put in place. So as we see governments going through a modernization process and kind of building new technology into their systems, let's think about opening up the data at some point of the process of those policies. So that's what we mean with open by default. Then all the rest of the principles, I'm not going to deep dive in each of them because are really upfront, and we have a lot of information in our webpage, but it's pretty upfront. The idea is that using standards, of course, because the data needs to be comparable, the data needs to be upfront, so accessible and usable. We've seen governments publishing data and you have to do 70 clicks to get to a certain data set. That's not accessible data. Timely and comprehensively. So if the data is published 10 years after the data was created, it doesn't have the same public value as if it were published on real time or within a couple of hours. And the idea is that open data can help enhance governance, help for public participation, informed public participation, to develop innovation, because we don't know the potential reuse of the data. So new enterprises can be created, and new journalist investigations can be created based on the data that is being open. And once again, the data belongs to the citizens. So this is only to kind of enhance also the right to access information. How to adopt the charter, and I know there's a lot of governmental representatives here, and the Open Data Charter has been collaborating with OGP for a long time. So there's a lot of OGP members that are adopters of the Open Data Charter. This is a rather easy process, and the idea is that you connect with us and you can actually have a conversation with the team to try to understand how your public policy around open data is being developed, how it's going to be implemented, and then you need to submit a letter to adopt the charter. That letter is sent to our board. First, the team, scans it, then it's sent to our board, and our board decides if a government is ready to adopt the charter. We always create blogs together to introduce our new members, and then you become part of our network and you can participate in all of our activities, of course. But more information on this can be sent later. What components should be considered in the construction of an open data policy? As we saw in the questions, there's a lot of you that are not as engaged with the open data policy as possible. Important components to take into account if you're thinking of developing an open data policy, or if you're in the process of that, or if you're becoming part of the team that develops the open data policy. As I said before, an open license, there's a lot of examples of open licenses out there. If there's the need to develop one, there's also examples of governments that develop their own open licenses. It has to do with the legal framework that needs to be put in place for an open data policy. Standards is very important. There's already a lot of standards on open data, on high value data sets. There's a lot of data sets that governments are demanded for. So, for example, public procurement, budget, of course, understanding where the public funds are going, who the government is hiring to do whatever project it is. So there's already standards, and the data could and should try to be open in open standards that already exists to make it comparable, not only internally, but also with, for example, other local governments or other governments worldwide. This seems like pretty obvious, but having a plan of open data, like an open data policy that is planned throughout a couple of years, understanding that opening up data is not easy. It's not like something that you do overnight. So taking the proper steps to create this policy and include the demand side from the get-go. So interact with civil society organizations, with the academia, with journalists to understand which is the kind of the demand of data that is out there, so that you also create like a virtual cycle in which the government publishes data and that data is actually being reused. So the public value of the open data is actually unlocked. It's always good to have potential use cases. As I said, there's a lot of things that have already been done. So understanding what the potential users of certain data sets to explain to your bosses, to other line ministries, to other civil society organizations is very important. The regulation, of course, there, and this is where the rights balance needs to be understood, and it's kind of playing out live. The right to access information and the right for privacy. So understanding what the limits of the publications are, which is just fine. Not every data set needs to be open. There's certain data that needs to be kept closed, if you will, like private data, security, national security data. There's a couple of data sets that are kind of the usual limits to any open data policy. Reuse mechanisms. This is super important. Public policy around open data doesn't end once the data is published. Getting the reuse bit right is as critical as getting the data in an open data portal published. So promoting data reuse, creating hackathons, challenges, meetings with sectorial organizations, with the private sector, with academics that are going to reuse the data, promoting that reuse, letting people know that the open data portal exists, that they can request data. That is very important. So getting the data published is a super important step, but it doesn't end there. And then on the other corner of this slide, you will see, of course, a lot of technical bits that need to go into an open data policy. Understanding like how to create an open data catalog, standardizing the metadata that it's going to accompany the data sets that is going to be open, a centralized portal. We always promote that each government has one centralized portal on open data. And then if the line ministries want to have a thematic open data portal, that's fine, but it should be connected with the centralized portal. to promote reuse. Then, of course, a whole internal process and probably a kind of publishing community within government that can help each other out while publishing the data sets. A budget, of course. This is, as I said, not easy, not true. It's not made overnight. You need to have a proper team. You need to have the proper technology on time. There's decisions to be made. Are you going to use an open data portal based on open aspect like CCAN, or are you going to hire somebody to kind of create your open data portal, which is just fine. Those are decisions to be made. We're always going to promote open code, but it's fine. And then, of course, one thing that is very important and sometimes has been left out is capacity building and data skills learning processes for the public officials that are going to be involved in publishing the data. So data skills, capacity building within government is very, very important and super critical for the sustainability of an open data policy. I know it seems a lot, but there's a lot of examples of governments connected to this. I see a zillion questions, but I'm going to go through the process of the presentation and then try to get as many questions as I can. Maybe I'll move through this to go to the idea of the questions. Let me tell you a little bit about how the open data kind of discussions have moved through time. When open data policies were first started, and you can see that in OGP commitments, most of the governments were concerned about having an open data portal and publishing data. That's it, like data as an end. So getting an open data portal, publishing whatever they could, and have the tick of like having an open data portal, and with that, having an open data policy. Through, of course, the maturity of this kind of policies, we've moved past that idea of kind of publish and they will come, publish and citizens will come and use the data, which didn't happen, to a process of publishing with a purpose. So trying to understand what kind of the social problem that you're going to try to tackle is first, and then go through the publication process after that decision was being made. So publishing with the purpose moved towards thematic open data policies. You can see there's a lot of really strong thematic open data communities, like one around public procurement, one around climate data. So like strong communities, thematic communities started to be developed to work on thematic priorities around open data. The Open Data Charter started working with our own community in creating tools that could help them promote those thematic policies. And now we have what is known as Open Up Guides. There's 5 of them. I have to update actually this slide. So one on data and agriculture, one on open data and climate action, another one on open data and anti-corruption, another one on land governance, and one on care economy. So these are all requests that we got from our network of adopters and endorsers. The idea is to help the governments understand which are the high-value data sets in each of these topics and help them have the conversation with civil society and other actors to understand what are the priority data sets, the high-value data sets within these themes to prioritize the publication. What will you find in an Open Up Guide? No matter the theme, key data sets, how the data should be collected, stored, shared, and published, good data policies and frameworks, including metadata standards, so a lot of technical aspects of the data that should be published. Whenever we've already implemented it or we found through research also existing gaps and challenges in frameworks or in standards. And once again, when there are existing use cases and real life examples. So that's important. And Great. We got here to the questions and answers. I haven't been able to see any of the questions in the chat. I'm sorry.
No worries. No worries. Thank you, Nati, for those insightful remarks and for emphasizing the role of open data in creating informed policies that positively affect people's lives and challenges and opportunities that work entails also at the local level. So I would be inviting everyone to pose your questions. You have a lot there, Nati. They're supposed to We're supposed to answer them through the Zoom chat, so we can go pass it over our next speakers. But there are some very interesting ones about AI and the cross path with the ODC charter and everything that has to do with innovation. So please feel free to use the chat to start a conversation with Nati Carfi. And thank you very, very much for this great stage setting. Sorry.
Thank
so
you
now
for the opportunity.
No, thank you so much. Now we're going to move forward to dive deeper into these topics. And open data is a powerful tool also for advancing the SDGs. So by enhancing transparency, fostering collaboration, and empowering citizens, it plays a crucial role in creating sustainable and equitable world. Our first panelist is Jenna Slotin, Senior Director of Policy at the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data. She has over 12 years of experience in sustainable development and peace building, focusing on political dynamics around the 2030 Agenda and development data. Jenna, it's over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Just advancing to the first slide. I'm pleased to be here and thank you for having me. Looking forward to talking with you more about this really important topic. So I wanted to start by just saying a few words about the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, which for short form, I will refer to as the Global Partnership going forward in the presentation. And then I'll come on to some of the other topics. Can I just double check that you can hear me well? Yes. Okay.
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. I just got a little note in Zoom, so I wanted to make sure that that was coming through clearly. Excellent. So the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data is a global multi-stakeholder network that was established in 2015, right on the sidelines of the summit for the SDGs, the approval of the 2030 Agenda, and agreement on the SDGs. We've grown a lot since then, and we have over 700 partners, as you see now. And those partners, as I said, come from across different stakeholder groups. So it includes numerous governments, international organizations, civil society organizations, business, academia, et cetera. And the global partnership exists to really improve the production, access, and use of data and technology to achieve sustainable and equitable development, and specifically to achieve those sustainable development goals. And so just to situate this in the discussion on open data, we're very much, work closely with the Open Data Charter as a partner and support all of the principles that Nati was just talking about on openness, but we're also very focused on how to strengthen the quality of the data, what capacities are needed, how to fill specific data gaps, how to leverage new data sources, et cetera. Pardon me. So we work in three ways. One is to broker partnerships in response to specific data needs and challenges. So we're a network, we're not an implementer, and I sit within the secretariat of that network. And so what we do is we work based on demand, largely from the governments that are part of the network. And they identify specific gaps and challenges. Maybe it's to fill a data gap, maybe it's to calculate a new indicator, maybe it's to figure out how to access a new data source like mobile data held by companies, or to work with citizen data, and what resources and infrastructure is needed to really leverage that data to make policy change and to make impact on people's lives. So we bring different players together and we broker partnerships to solve those specific challenges. The second thing we do is we facilitate learning across the network. And so we facilitate a lot of peer exchange, a lot of learning events. We, again, broker and facilitate specific kinds of capacity development in response to very clear needs around everything from data science skills to data visualization to data governance needs, and do fellowship programs, et cetera. And we produce a lot of materials on lessons learned, best practices, and guidance. And then lastly, we build coalitions to advocate for change with regard to really effectively leveraging and using data to achieve the SDGs. And that includes advocating to mobilize investments in government data systems, which I'll talk more about in a minute, advocating for much more accountable data governance, and advocating for more inclusion and representation and agency for people in the production of data and really in how it's used. So those are kind of the ways in which we work, and you see some numbers on the screen for kind of the reach. Now, as you think about your action plans and adopting OGP, becoming an OGP member partner, I'm going to focus on two main areas. The first is really why invest in data and digital systems as a kind of underpinning to this open government commitment. And why is there a real need for high quality, reliable, and timely data? And why do you need to make good use of it, and how to overcome some of the barriers to doing so? And then the second topic I'm going to dive into a little bit is how to ensure that the data systems are, and the data that's produced is representative, equitable, and really benefits the people they're intended to serve. And so this is, again, very much situating that need for open data and investing in open data, but thinking about its quality, and then also how it's used and how that impacts people. And also how to leverage the data that comes from outside government to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. So starting on like why invest and strengthen data systems. For the first reason I'll give is economic impact. So we worked with Dahlberg and commissioned a study to evaluate the return on investment. And that study found that for every dollar invested in national data systems, there's on average a return of $32. So that's a very significant return on investment. But the thing is that data systems aren't visible. It's like data systems are like the plumbing in a house. You need to keep the plumbing in good condition, but no one sees it. So why would you, want to focus on it? But without good plumbing, you risk flooding in your house, you risk massive damage, and a relatively small investment can go a very long way. The next reason is governance impact, and this links very closely, I think, to OGP and the goals that we're discussing here today. And Nati highlighted that open and accessible data leads to transparency, and it enables people to hold governments accountable because they can see what data are being used, and that allows for a reduction of corruption over time with more oversight, and it can build trust between citizens and government. So just to give an example, in Nigeria, there's a civil society organization called Budge It. And what they do is they take that data that was published on local government budgets in PDFs, in that very non-accessible format that Natty was talking about. They digitize it, they make it accessible, they make it understandable to civil society. And they've had tremendous success enabling advocates to identify millions of dollars that were being wasted on things like hospitals that were never built. And so it can have a real value in that regard and lead to real change in terms of oversight and accountability. But also having better data and stronger data systems, of course, leads to better decisions. So you know where to target scarce resources and how to be responsive to people's needs. And you can take a very scarce investments and invest in a much more targeted way. So an example from Kenya is that the National Police merged a whole range of data sources from administrative data, crowdsourced data, private sector data to identify road crash hotspots on their roads to say, what are the areas of highest risk? And then they use that information to target interventions for road safety on just 150 kilometers of the riskiest roads. And that allowed them to deploy their very scarce resources and to save more lives. So those are just some examples of the kind of governance impact of having very good data. But as I said, data is not sexy. And it's not an investment that politicians get a lot of kudos for. And it's hard to get reelected when you say, I've really strengthened the government data system. And so what happens is that no one makes data a political priority. And then what happens is many public data systems at local levels, at national levels, experience chronic underinvestment. And so the quality, the reliability, the timeliness, the granularity of the data is not very good. And so opening it up is important, but there's also a kind of fundamental question is whether the data system itself is generating the best data possible. And oftentimes what we see is the assistance that does go to strengthen data systems, whether it be from kind of the government's own investment or from external sort of donor funded projects and programs, is that they're fragmented and they duplicate, and there's a lot of waste. And so what's really needed is some sort of bigger picture, more systematic thinking for investing in data systems. So now I'm just going to mention briefly one initiative that we lead together with the UN, UNDP, UNFPA, UNICEF, and the World Bank to address this particular problem of making data more of a political priority so that more concerted investment can be made in strong data systems and in opening up that data in a way that's accessible and usable by citizens, but also by all parts of government. And so the idea of this initiative, which is called the Power of Data, which is about a year old and was launched at the SDG Summit last year, is really about creating a platform that brings all players together to sort of say, okay, what are the priorities for the data system, and how are we going to make a much more joined up effort to strengthen that data system, and making sure that investments are aligned and making sure that more investment can really be mobilized. And so the Power of Data is currently working with 15 countries. There's 10 or more that are looking to join. And so this is a bit more of a national level platform, but as local representatives, it can be a good way of docking in to a kind of more systematic investment in the data systems for the countries that are part of it. And I'm happy to be in touch with other opportunities to link in with the Power of Data. So now we're going to shift to another dimension of kind of strengthening data to achieve the SDGs, strengthening data systems to really achieve sustainable and equitable development. And that's how to ensure that the data systems themselves and the data value chain and the processes for compiling or producing, accessing, analyzing, using the data as representative, is equitable, and really benefits the people that they're intended to serve. So I'm going to highlight an initiative that we've led with partners around the world over the last 2 years now, and it's called the Data Values Project. And the Data Values Project is really a whole community effort to advocate and acknowledge and then advocate for challenging the power structures that are embedded in data and data systems to ensure that everyone really benefits, and to recognize that the decisions on what is measured and how that's measured and how data are used is embedded with the sort of power structures that exist in society. And one of the ways of enabling more people to be empowered and represented in data is by challenging those power structures. And so through a year-long consultation, we sort of unpacked this question of getting at how power is embedded in data and data systems and data processes, and came up with a white paper that includes, multiple examples of people challenging those structures, but then also a very short and easy to use manifesto of 5 points to sort of shift that power and make data more equitable and representative. So these are the 5 points of the Data Values Manifesto. Sort of the community now counts sort of hundreds of people and organizations, and was developed through engagement with organizations all around the world in over 60 countries. And I'll just go through these 5 points because I think they're easy to understand, but also quite meaningful. The first is to support people to shape how they're represented in data. And that means that people have to have a say in the design and collection of data that affects their lives. So, for example, if a household survey is being conducted and there aren't adequate questions on that get at the experiences of, for example, persons with disabilities, then their experience won't be represented in that data set. And it may be that, that they then experience continued marginalization. So there's a question of representation and engagement of groups that are marginalized or at risk of being marginalized. The second is about investing in public participation for accountability. And this is about people being included in decisions related to data use and reuse. And this is particularly relevant now with the advent of AI, right? A whole range of data sets, not just web scraping for large language models, but machine learning and other kinds of models are being used and deployed by the public sector to automate decision making. And people's data is being used in that process, but they don't have a good understanding of what that means and what the implications might be for them. So this manifesto point is advocating for engaging people or their representatives in that decision making of how data is used and reused. The next is to democratize data skills for greater equality. So, and this is about, building people's confidence to engage with and use data. It's not about making everyone a data scientist or a statistician, but it's about enabling people to ask critical questions about how data is being used and how data is being presented to them in the newspaper, by government, or by other actors, so that they can question that and think about it in terms of how they experience public services, governance, et cetera. The fourth is about creating cultures of transparency, data sharing, and use. And so this is really about putting that data into action and building those cultures of data use in government. So it's not enough to have the data. It's not enough to make the data high quality. And as Natty said, it's not enough just to put the data out there in the world, but also to make sure it's being used so that it increases in value. And the last is funding open and responsive data systems so that all people share in the benefits of data. And we've talked about that investment already. And so our experience with this manifesto has been with governments, with civil society organizations, with international organizations, academic institutions, that having a framework like this is very helpful because it provides a common and simple language for people to use to really push for more equitable and responsive systems, and linking to a kind of manifesto like this that is global can also provide some legitimacy in that work and that advocacy. And so this is my last slide. Oops, the click isn't working. Oh, oops, 1 second. So my last slide here is how would you start with this framework, with the Data Values Manifesto? And we have a lot of sort of tools and resources and ideas on that. And so I invite you to connect with me or to visit our website. Basically, our advice and working with partners, we've learned from their experience, how they've implemented it and tested out some different approaches, is that there are different ways of reflecting internally about what this means and how you would change practices within your own organization or local government, how to bring people together around these ideas and discuss them, how to bring up these principles or values to decision makers, how to build coalitions behind these ideas, and how to kind of share and pass on learning. And so we have some sort of inspirational resources. We run a Data Values Advocates program, as well as capturing different voices on why this matters to individuals in their community and for the issues they care about. And then we have the manifesto, we have the white paper. We've actually created a game to facilitate discussion around this topic. And we're developing and will have available very soon an e-learning course, as well as a starter pack, which will include best practices, examples, a discussion and training guide, and a checklist that one can use to evaluate where you might be in implementing these principles and what steps you can take to move along in that direction. So there are some links on this slide that then colleagues at OGP can circulate, and I'm happy to share those in other contexts or in the chat. So thanks very much. That's it for me, and I'm happy to answer any questions in the chat.
Great. Thank you, Jenna. This was very insightful. And thank you for sharing strategies and how to invest in data and digital systems, and also how to overcome these barriers to doing so at the local level. I think that's really appreciated. And also how to leverage the use of good quality data to achieve the SDGs. So we will be, as you said, sharing these resources with the local community and the wide community that also attended here today, so they can be updated with all the information and all the resources you've already put together, that is very valuable for our community. Thank you so much, Jenna. Let's turn to our next speaker. Open data is a powerful enabler for advancing gender equality. By providing the necessary insights and evidence, it can help visualize systemic inequalities and foster inclusive policies. Ana Gabriel Zúñiga is the policy lead in gender and data at ILDA and brings with her more than 15 years of experience as an activist, political representative, and international consultant in different open government topics. Today, she will discuss how improving the collection, sharing, and use of gender disaggregated data is essential for making significant progress toward gender equality. So this is over to you, Ana Gabriel. Bienvenida.
Thank you so much, Clora. Hi, everyone. I'm going to make my presentation in Spanish in case you have to turn on the AI support for translation. So thank you so much for that. Muchísimas gracias al equipo de OGP local. Para mí realmente es un placer enorme acompañar esta reflexión colectiva sobre el poder del uso de los datos. Y quiero tomar como base lo que nos planteaba Nati en su presentación, de que la data es abierta en la medida que logramos y garantizamos su uso y reuso. Y además a nosotras desde ILDA nos gusta mucho hablar también de la reapropiación, y eso es algo que me voy a referir un poquito más adelante. Para que conozcan un poquito más sobre nosotras en ILDA, las 4 áreas de trabajo generales sobre las que colaboramos y además siempre se interrelacionan entre sí: datos para la inclusión y la igualdad de género, datos para la acción democrática, datos para la gobernanza del futuro y gobernanza de datos desde una perspectiva del sur global, o como bien llamamos ahora, la mayoría global. Para nosotras, el trabajo con los datos tiene una mirada necesariamente feminista, entendiendo la necesidad de que si hay un conjunto de datos que cuentan historias, que nos pasan por el cuerpo y que además actualmente tienen una relevancia tan importante como el tema de los cuidados, como lo ha estado trabajando Open Data Charter, como el tema de feminicidios que hemos venido trabajando en ILDA en asocio con muy distinguidas académicas, necesitamos más mirada de esas mujeres, de esas personas y de esas historias y personas y mujeres más involucradas en todo el proceso de generación de datos y del uso de los datos. Vuelvo a tomar en consideración lo que nos hablaba Nati de todo ese círculo virtuoso de la generación de los datos. Necesitamos más mirada de género en la generación de los datos, más mirada de género en la recolección de los datos, más mirada de género en el análisis de los datos y más reapropiación de esa data en su uso y reuso. La data es viva y para mantener ese dinamismo es necesario que más organizaciones de sociedad civil y que más actores se reapropien de la data. Ahorita en particular yo les voy a comentar de lo que ha sido el esfuerzo y el trabajo, porque más organizaciones que trabajan derechos de las mujeres, así como activistas y colectivas feministas, han venido teniendo un espacio y mayor protagonismo en esos procesos de generación de datos. Les queremos contar sobre 4 iniciativas puntuales en las que hemos experimentado esta realidad, de este esfuerzo, esta mirada. Les hemos hecho además a lo largo de la presentación, que luego ustedes tienen acceso a hipervínculos que les permitan a ustedes indagar en mayor detalle, porque hoy naturalmente es una cosa muy corta, muy concreta, ¿verdad? Pero si algún tema en particular les interesa, lo pueden indagar en esos hipervínculos. El primero que les quiero conversar es el Feminist Accountability Framework, o la mirada o el proceso de transparencia feminista, el marco de rendición de cuentas feminista. Este proceso lo trabajamos con más de 70 organizaciones en todo el sur global, con colectivos especializados en la agenda de datos, como era el caso de Hilda, pero también con colectivos y organizaciones especializadas en la agenda de género, para dar un seguimiento a propósito de la presentación de Jenna, de específicamente el ODS 5 de igualdad de género, que tiene una agenda propia que se llamaba Generación Igualdad, y que justo el otro año vamos a tener 30 años de la celebración de la Convención de Beijing, donde se va a evaluar qué tanto hemos avanzado en el empoderamiento y la generación de condiciones para el disfrute pleno de los derechos de las mujeres. Y en este esfuerzo lo que quiero destacar, que es diferenciador, es que se generaron los datos, se analizaron y se hicieron esfuerzos de devolución de ese proceso directamente con organizaciones y con comunidades y con activismos de género y de mujeres en territorio, en campo. Se dio un mecanismo de encuesta para recabar esa información y un procesamiento de datos desagregado, pero además acompañando con una serie de talleres que nos permitían explicar por qué estábamos recabando la data. Porque también la mirada de datos abiertos pasa por no hacer esfuerzos meramente extractivistas. Es decir, yo tengo interés en una agenda, me dirijo a una comunidad o un ecosistema, extraigo sus datos, no volvemos a saber de eso. Nosotras desde Hilda apostamos porque los datos abiertos tienen que ser una mirada y esa apertura pasa también por codiseñar el instrumento y por mantener un proceso de rendición de cuentas e intercambio permanente con esas comunidades y ecosistemas de las cuales estamos recabando información. Fue muy potente el resultado de este esfuerzo porque nos permitió abrir información sobre dónde estaba yendo realmente el dinero y la inversión que se habían comprometido estados, que se habían comprometido gobiernos, cooperación internacional y organizaciones de sociedad civil para avanzar en el cumplimiento de este ODS 5. Y ahí se identificaron una serie de elementos de avance, pero no lo suficientes, identificando que todavía seguimos en una deuda enorme. Y para nosotras, el tema fundamental era demostrar que los datos son un puente que pueden conjuntar comunidades y ecosistemas, pero que además potencian la incidencia política y la incidencia estratégica de una comunidad o un ecosistema, en este caso el movimiento de mujeres. Puntualmente, para que en su mirada de política exterior feminista tuvieran mucha más claridad de hacia dónde había que dirigir el esfuerzo para avanzar en estas agendas. Y eso es muy potente y también queríamos traer ejemplos puntuales de cómo hacerlo, ¿no? Luego tenemos una agenda denominada los diálogos dateros feministas o los Feminist Data Dialogues, que están enfocados en abrir la conversación necesaria sobre cómo nos imaginamos y cómo entendemos la generación, análisis, uso y reuso de datos cuando se tratan de las agendas o derechos de las mujeres. Hemos tenido varios procesos con Guatemala y Brasil. Hemos tenido un proceso en el marco del Encuentro Feminista de América Latina y el Caribe. Y vamos a iniciar 2 procesos muy particulares donde estamos utilizando esta mirada de co-crear los instrumentos de recolección con la comunidad, con el ecosistema y mantener una interacción permanente. Vamos a tener un proceso de diálogos dateros feministas en territorio en Argentina, iniciando en el próximo mes, donde visitaremos Mendoza, Salta, también Buenos Aires y Rosario, donde estaremos dando una mirada más regional y de territorio con organizaciones de mujeres que no necesariamente se autorreconocen como feministas, pero que trabajan por los derechos de las mujeres para construir con ellas un fortalecimiento de capacidades en el uso y generación de datos para mejorar su incidencia en temas puntuales en lo local inicialmente, para que puedan avanzar en agendas que resguarden, garanticen y potencien los derechos de las mujeres. Y también en ese mismo marco de diálogos dateros feministas, estamos avanzando con un proceso de anticorrupción feminista, donde también vamos a ir a territorio en Guatemala y en Colombia para levantar la información de cuáles son esas grandes reformas necesarias desde las miradas de las mujeres en materia anticorrupción en estos 2 países, los cuales además los elegimos porque la agenda de OGP ha tenido un avance bastante importante y lo vamos a enmarcar en los challenges y en los planes de acción que Guatemala y Colombia están desarrollando. Entonces también queríamos evidenciar que conjuntar agendas y esfuerzos hace más fácil y potente trabajar con una mirada de género, procurando tener incidencia y un impacto puntual en temas específicos. Y los otros dos temas tienen que ver con el Data Standard, el Feminicide Data Standard o el estándar de feminicidios que trabajamos con académicas y desde Hilda también, liderado por Silvana, quien ahora lidera el Global Data Barometer, que está enfocado en de verdad identificar cuáles son los mínimos éticos cuando hablamos de feminicidios, cuáles son los mínimos en el proceso de recabación de información, de publicación y además resguardo y no revictimización de las mujeres y sus familias que son víctimas de feminicidio. Es muy potente, es muy interesante. Nosotros partimos del hecho de que cuando hablamos de un estándar en estos temas no es poner una camisa de fuerza, que todos los procesos se trabajan igual, pero sí de que vamos a garantizar un mínimo ético que merecemos las mujeres cuando se trata de un tema tan complejo. Y finalmente, una mirada feminista de la inteligencia artificial, entendiendo que lo que alimenta la inteligencia artificial y sus algoritmos son los datos, y en la medida que tengamos una gobernanza inclusiva y un avance de regulación donde la igualdad de género esté incorporada, vamos a reducir las brechas y las desigualdades que en algunos casos se considera que pueden ser aceleradas por la inteligencia artificial. Lo que nosotros buscamos es, como les comentaba, definir qué data necesitamos realmente para contar nuestras historias, posicionar nuestras necesidades, nuestros intereses y defender nuestros derechos. Y eso posiblemente, si lo hacemos solo desde la mirada de apertura, no tendremos el gran espectro y la gran riqueza de la interseccionalidad que si trabajamos de la mano de las organizaciones de mujeres, colectivos y activismos feministas. En este trabajo que llevamos haciendo, que hemos intensificado, en los últimos 3 años, tenemos una serie de hallazgos que nos parece riquísimo compartir con ustedes y que son además recomendaciones cuando quieran trabajar el tema de datos y género. Lo primero es no más data sobre nosotras, sin nosotras. Para nosotras avanzar en la estandarización y el reconocimiento de los datos con una mirada de género, necesitamos sí o sí tener el valor y el insight comunitario de las organizaciones de base y que tengamos mínimos éticos claros. Y no podemos hablar de una ética de los datos si no hay una claridad desde la perspectiva de género. La data es un puente muy poderoso para juntar varios ecosistemas, el gobierno local, las organizaciones de género y las organizaciones que tienen alguna expertise en temas de datos y transparencia. Veamos la data no como esa cosa de temor que algunas veces también los gobiernos nacionales o locales tienen, como si abrimos esta data va a quedar en evidencia que tenemos una serie de vacíos. Sí, pero eso está bien también. Y va a haber una colaboración de organizaciones sobre entonces este espectro de vacíos hacia dónde queremos avanzar. Nos permite tener diálogos improbables que posiblemente bajo ninguna otra circunstancia que no sea un proceso de apertura de datos tendríamos de diferentes actores o ecosistemas. Promover la incidencia feminista basada en evidencia. En un contexto de tanta desinformación y desacelerada oposición donde nos cuesta encontrarnos, hay mucho ruido y hay poca posibilidad de tener evidencia, nosotras seguimos apostando y enraizando porque los datos nos van a dar mejores posibilidades de identificar dónde negociar, hacia dónde invertir recursos y cuáles son las prioridades sobre las que tenemos que trabajar. Que también a veces tiene que ver con percepciones, pero tiene que ver con identificar que las acciones estratégicas están basadas en evidencia. Y que sin duda alguna, si tenemos más transparencia feminista, vamos a tener mejores políticas públicas. Si logramos tener más datos desagregados de género, si logramos co-crear procesos de apertura de datos para mejorar políticas públicas, para evaluarlas o co-crearlas, y si tenemos la habilidad y la capacidad de desagregar datos sobre cómo esas políticas públicas están impactando o no, o impacto positivo o negativo en las mujeres, en este caso de sus territorios, de sus gobiernos locales, pues es mucho más potente y vamos a lograr un mayor impacto y una mayor transparencia en esas políticas públicas. Algunas recomendaciones para nosotras hacia ustedes: siempre procuren que todos los procesos comunitarios o locales dirigidos a recabar datos tengan una mirada de género, un elemento desagregado. Acompáñense de mujeres que ustedes reconozcan, champions, reformers en sus territorios, que puedan asociarse y acompañar para garantizar esta mirada de género, o incluso la academia o organizaciones como nosotras que hagamos ese acompañamiento también. Validar la data y las herramientas que van a utilizar con las organizaciones, activistas o colectivas que tengan esa especialización en género. Garanticen en la medida de lo posible, siempre que van a hacer algún recabamiento de datos o una apertura de algún dato importante en sus gobiernos locales, en sus territorios, que esté desagregado. Y si no tienen esa información, un paso interesante sería escoger un tema puntual sobre el cual puedan iniciar ese desagregado de data. Y la apuesta máxima es que la data de género sea interoperable, para que eso nos permita entre gobiernos locales, entre otras instituciones o incluso con gobiernos nacionales, poder tener mayor capacidad de identificar dónde están los vacíos en las políticas públicas, en los bienes y servicios que brindan los estados o gobiernos, y sobre eso tener mayores avances con mirada de género. Y para ir cerrando, algunas buenas prácticas que además nos tomamos el sentir de tomarlo desde lo que ustedes han identificado en OGP para que se sientan familiarizadas y que no crean que es algo inalcanzable. Está una propuesta, bueno, esta sí es un elemento que se había hecho desde IVOS y que nosotras habíamos colaborado. Jalisco y Bogotá con contrataciones en temas de transporte público con perspectiva de género, hicieron un esfuerzo súper interesante de ir recabando esa información, con la apuesta en algún momento avanzar inclusive a banderas rojas que nos digan no hay una mirada de género en la idealización o diseño del transporte público. En Argentina, una buena práctica de publicación de datos relacionados con la violencia basada en género. En Corea, que están avanzando en Open Gender Data Portals, en portales de datos con una mirada de género. Y en Liberia, que están empezando y tuvieron una incidencia interesante en la ley que regula el tema de estadísticas para que se haga una incorporación en todos los procesos de datos desagregados de género. Y bueno, de parte nuestra, esta es un poco la mirada. Queríamos plantear desde el poder del dato, el reuso y reapropiación de nosotras, las mujeres y también las personas sexualmente diversas y no binarias, que tenemos algo que decir respecto a esos datos que hablan de nosotras, que cuentan nuestras historias, porque somos más que un dato, somos más que números, somos comunidades, ecosistemas, y para que ese dato realmente tenga el poder de ser reusado, es necesario involucrar a las organizaciones para lograr las transformaciones ambiciosas que queremos. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Ana Gabriel. Es súper inspirador el trabajo que hacen. Thank you for shedding light on how open data and gender equity intersect in such relevant ways. Your insights play a crucial role in understanding and addressing gender-related issues. And also thank you for sharing the feminist perspective ILDA is furthering through the collection and work around open data and creating better policies. And lastly, thank you for sharing all the good practices you've also already spotted and some of the resources that Mercedes has already put in the Zoom chat. Remember to the attendees to participate and interact as much as possible. Use the chat to ask questions, make comments, and contribute throughout the session. And now, sharing with you that data plays a crucial role in decision-making and enhancing services within your city. To harness the full potential of data, leaders must ensure that their city effectively utilizes existing data, identifies gaps, and seeks innovative ways to drive improvements. To discuss this, we're joined by Ben Snaith, a senior researcher at the Open Data Institute based in UK. His research focuses on how ideas of the transformative power of data coverage and diverge with societal realities, including long-term research into data and open cities. Today, Ben will share how cities can better use their open data by strategically looking at the existing open data ecosystems. So Ben, we're looking forward to your insights. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. I know we don't have very much time, so I will go through as quickly as possible. So for those who aren't familiar, I'm from the Open Data Institute. We're an independent not-for-profit that's been around for over 10 years now. We were set up by Sir Nigel Shadbolt and Sir Tim Berners-Lee as part of the initial first wave of excitement into open data. The reality is now that we work on things that aren't just open data. We use the open data, the data spectrum, So lots of our work is based on sharing data between organizations and departments that need it, and pushing people towards openness. I'm going to talk briefly about some of our research into cities. Lots of us will have seen some of these headlines, and many headlines similar from around the world. So concerns that things like smart cities and the use of data and technology is going to lead to surveillance, privacy infringements, data misuse, and these are all characterized largely by a reduction in the public trust for local and national governments to make use of data. This means that at the moment, the data economy is often characterized by these kind of limitations, rather than focusing on the potential positives. Instead, we're looking at lots of the barriers that are holding back this use of data. What we can see on the right-hand side is a visual that we use as part of our theory of change. So we're trying to shift governments and organizations towards this green arrow where data is stewarded, new products and services are created on top of this data, and then decisions that create meaningful positive impacts for citizens, and for people, organizations, businesses, are made on top of that data. Now, what we see is many places going towards this data fearing, where there's this distrust in data. So we need to think of ways to build this trust back. And then the pyramid on the left-hand side is part of lots of our research that we've done into trustworthy data stewardship, where these 10 components can be built upon, and I can share links after the presentation. These 10 components can be built upon to generate or regenerate trust, particularly with citizens. Now, where lots of our research is heading at the moment is in recognition of this reduction in trust, and also the genuine desire for people within the public sector to use data to benefit citizens. We're seeing a wave of participation, using data to allow citizens to participate or to share their own data to improve services. And this is something that we need to be very mindful about, because participation means lots of different things. And there's a lot of people that use terms like participation to just mean that they basically ask their citizens a couple of questions, didn't necessarily do too much with the data, but they can say that they ran a participatory process. So this off-cited ladder on your screen is from, I believe, a sociologist's research from quite a long time ago. That's the ladder of participation that shows how we can shift from kind of informing and consulting with citizens towards genuine empowerment and using data to change how services work. We're not the only organization researching this. There's the Ada Lovelace Institute that's also based in the UK. But this is the start of our research that we've been delivering with the Apti Institute, who are based in India and also a not-for-profit. And the following slides will talk about how this desire to participate and involve the participation of citizens works in practice. So I've got 3 examples. I'll probably only run through a couple of them, but happy to share the slides afterwards, and these are all online. So our first phase of this work, and we've delivered this presentation previously, was focused on mapping the landscape of approaches that are taken for participation. So one that has come up frequently is based around safety in India. So rather than looking for traditional data from kind of sensors or from services, the safety pin looked for non-traditional data sources, so crowdsourced data where citizens could report safety concerns within their neighborhood, that could then be compiled and analyzed by the platform and then shared with from the private sector and transformed into insights for policymakers within local government to understand issues that from citizens that were maybe less reported. We had the previous presentation on feminist data approaches, and the safety pin team kind of took this to heart. Lots of this safety information was based around women's safety, particularly in public transport, in ways, and was gathered in ways that traditional approaches might not have been able to understand these issues specifically. The second example that we've got of participatory approaches is Posmo. So this uses a specific piece of architecture called a data cooperative that not only is looking for citizens to share data that can then be used by a third party, but actually to give members control over the data and are able to then control how their data is used. So one of these examples from using Posmo was using data donations, so voluntarily providing data to understand climate-related issues and to ensure for the citizens that that data was being used for the purposes that were intended. I will quickly just note that the final example. So this is very initially an academic partnership project with the Barcelona government, I believe, that looked beyond giving control. So I talked before about the ladder of participation. So beyond providing input to being able to actually be in full kind of sovereignty of the citizens, and could again use data to build community-oriented services and provide a platform for citizens to participate in democratic processes, whilst again retaining the sense of control over data. All three of these examples, and there's many more out there, are all focused on this kind of the newer wave of the use of data and technology, particularly within cities, but not exclusively, where there's a recognition that providing services or running data and technology from a top-down approach can lead to problems such as the lack of trust, and also the kind of, I guess, limited buy-in from citizens regarding services. So these are all looking to regain and strengthen trust and using these approaches to do so. So some final reflections. We have an Airtable and a form for people to submit their own examples that will feed into our participatory data program at the ODI. So if you have other best practices where citizens have been invited to share data or control data about them within a local context, then you can use this, scan this QR code and add them. The other QR code also has some other examples that we've not talked about here, and links from other forms of participation. And there's many more. I'll be sure to provide links to our participatory data program that can provide further information. So just to very, very, very quickly note that this is just part of the work that we deliver at the ODIs. This is part of the research team. We also do consultancy and training. So particularly relevant to many people here, particularly before you said you were at the beginning of your data journey. We have a whole load of training online. This can be delivered either facilitated by our trainers, or we have self-paced training that can provide you with some more of the kind of baseline of understanding the foundational knowledge of what open data is, what the ethical consequences of using data might be, using data with AI. So I'll share this link shortly as well. Happy to answer any questions. There's a QR code there that will bring up my email and my LinkedIn as well. I know you've had about 30 QR codes today, so hopefully you don't lose this one as well. But happy to answer any questions on the chat or an email. It was a pleasure to speak to you all.
Thank you, Ben. It was great to hear how we can encourage greater participation in creating an open data infrastructure to bring greater value and help cities to move to a more open future. And yes, we'll be sharing your QR codes. There's never enough. You know, we want to get in touch with everyone here today. So for our final segment, we'll be diving into the Open Gov Challenge. To explain this exciting initiative, I'm pleased to hand it over to my colleague, Sarah, who will walk us through the next steps on how we can get involved. Sarah, could you please join us now?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Clara.
Sure.
So I'm Sarah Kennedy. I'm part of the OGP's Policy and Partnerships team. And the challenge initiative was really very much in response from a participatory process of creating our own 5-year strategy at OGP. And one of the key things we heard was a call for more ambition on reforms and a need to kind of narrow our focus into specific areas in order to make that targeted progress. So we launched the Open Government Challenge last year to respond to that call and to challenge our members, to challenge ourselves, to really consider the level of ambition in our reforms and to acknowledge the innovative work that our members are doing. So you'll see from, well, this slide that there are 10 different areas, 10 different challenge areas that come up that cover a lot of different government topics, things like access to information, anti-corruption, gender and inclusion. You may notice that open data is not one of them. This is because, as our speakers today have already shared, open data's power comes from its use and its reuse, and therefore the Open Gov Challenge views it more as a tool to achieve the thematic reforms. So simply opening data may improve its availability and accessibility, yes, but the ambitious part, the part of the challenge, is taking it that extra step further and applying it as a tool to the thematic policies like these 10 different challenge areas. So as an example, also to kind of piggyback on one of our presentations today, the gender and inclusion policy area of the challenge asks reformers to adopt an open government reforms to promote the full participation of women and underrepresented groups politically, socially, and economically. But one of the more specific examples that's actually given on our website as a possible challenge commitment in this area names open data, saying to institutionalize or make compulsory the publication of data disaggregated by impacted communities, such as open gender data. We've heard about this today, right? So another example of where open data fits into these policy areas might be in the public participation challenge area, where, as you can see, it asks for reforms that mainstream or embed high quality and inclusive participation practices across governments. So something else we've just heard about today is the focus on what to publish. So what are the key data sets to publish, so that maybe users aren't completely inundated with unhelpful information, and also so that the data produced is actually benefiting the communities it is published for. So institutionalizing a participatory consultation process as part of that could be a really great challenge commitment. So open data isn't specifically mentioned, but it can be the driving force behind many successful submissions, and it's kind of all about how the tool is integrated into this thematic solution. We are calling on OGP members to make progress through these 10 areas, and we'd absolutely love to see some good new reforms being committed to on the local level with open data as the driving force behind them. I'm going to leave the link to the challenge-specific policy areas webpage in the chat, just because I think it helps kick off a brainstorming process of how open data can play a role in these commitments, even where it's not specifically stated in the description. Start thinking about how it could play into the challenge areas. So there are a range of different ways to get involved in this initiative. Firstly, if your OGP local is already developing an action plan or soon will be, then as part of that co-creation process, you can nominate a relevant commitment for the challenge. It's already in the action plan, great. OGP members can make standalone actions as well that don't necessarily need to sit within an action plan. So if you're not in a co-creation year, you can still make a commitment specifically in response to any of those 10 challenge areas and just submit it through a form on our website. Neither of these are mutually exclusive. You can do something through an action plan and also make a standalone commitment. And thirdly, we will also eventually have Open Gov awards tied to this program. The details are still working out. But all submitted challenges will be considered for the awards to have that extra level of acknowledgement of the innovative ideas. So that was short and quick. I hope I've encouraged you to consider taking up the challenge, or at least to start brainstorming about how open data can have an impact on these different policy areas. And I'm happy to answer questions in the chat. So back to you, Clara.
Thank you, Sarah, for explaining what an ambitious data commitments look like to meet the Open Gov challenge. To have more information about the challenge, look at the link that Sarah already shared, and also go to the OGP website where you can easily find the information. So as we close, I encourage you to reflect on the diverse approaches we've discussed today, using data to achieve sustainable development goals, open data and gender, and how cities can apply an open data strategy. How they apply into your context. So together, these approaches are key to promoting open data in local governments. With that in mind, let's summarize the key takeaways that highlight the importance of these approaches. Open data empowers government, citizens, and civil society and private sector organizations to make informed decisions. By providing timely and effective access to data, individuals and organizations can uncover new insights and foster innovative ideas that can yield social and economic benefits, enhancing people's lives at the local level. Also, empowering individuals to shape their data representation fosters accountability and inclusivity, crucial for advancing the Sustainable Development Goals. There is still a need for clear, accessible, and disaggregated data to address women's challenges. However, to meet this need, more than data is necessary. It is important to open up spaces for participation, develop data standards, and foster communities to support the effective use of data to tackle gender inequalities. Also, data plays a crucial role in decision-making and enhancing services within your city. To harness the full potential of data, leaders must ensure that the city effectively utilizes existing data, identifies gaps, and seeks innovative ways to make improvements. And the OGP Challenge is calling our members to leverage open data to enhance transparency, promote gender equality, and foster civic participation, empower communities to drive positive change. Our session has come to an end. You will be able to access the video of this session later in this week on the OGP website in the deep dive section, which this is another QR code that we're sharing for you today. Before we wrap up, I want to express my gratitude to all the speakers who participated in the past 5 deep dive sessions. Thank you for generously sharing your time and knowledge. I also want to thank the attendees who actively participated in the Zoom chat discussions. Lastly, I would love to give thanks to the OGP local team. Together, we have achieved our main goal, which was to provide tangible examples of how to develop ambitious commitments in important political areas to our newest members and the entire Gov community. I hope these examples have inspired you. If you want to know more about OGP local team, don't hesitate to visit our website, your community in Slack, and our local thematic circles. And make sure you check our local roundup to stay updated. Here, I am going to share even more QR codes, I think, but thank you all very much for your participation and have a great rest of the day. See you later. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.